Hey book girlies, I'm Sarah.
Hey gamer guys,
You had trouble with it for a second.
it's Ian.
And you're listening to a pod of sass and sarcasm. So what game did I just pull you away from?
My friends and I have been playing more modified Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and it's been a lot of effort to try to get everyone to be able to even play with each other.
Is that because you are illegally trying to play with each other?
Yeah.
So it's difficult not because of like people's schedules and things like that. It's difficult because you're literally doing stuff that you're not supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it's literally just not working. So we're like, all right, look it up online. What can we do to try to connect? Has anyone else been having this problem? But so far, I've only been able to play with like 2 people, and I'm kind of tired of it.
Are these 2 people good at the game or bad at the game?
Pretty good at the game.
And so you're tired of it because you want to win?
Yeah, I want to win a couple more matches. So I was like, I enjoy playing with you, buddy, but it'd be great if I could play against someone else.
Yeah, I was hearing you from my office today, just calling out to people, being like, I don't want to play with you anymore.
Yeah, I've been trying to get other people to play, and it's either it won't launch properly, or we can finally connect, and then it won't launch properly, or it half launches, and then we don't see any screen, or it's just you simply straight up can't connect, which is quite frustrating. You're like, what is wrong?
What is this game again? It's like Super Mario Brothers Brawl, but like, what is it?
It's a party fighting game.
So you fight parties? You're like, hey, my party is cooler than your party?
No, it's a party
game.
game. So you play with a lot of people typically, and so it's not supposed to be taken seriously, but people take this one pretty seriously.
And by people, you mean you and your friends?
A little bit. And then it's just a fighting game, so you're certain movesets to like, I can punch and kick in this way, and the person can punch and kick in that way. And it's got all kinds of fun characters in it.
It sounds kind of lame. I'm almost wishing that we were talking about Warframe.
Come on. I've been playing as Mewtwo.
Who's that?
He's a Pokemon.
I'm getting so confused because I think I've seen stuff about this where, yeah, there is, like, they have a lot of characters, not just from the Super Mario world, so I get confused because I was like, wait, I swore Mewtwo was some kind of Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh thing or whatever, and then you were like, yeah, it's Pokemon. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's Nintendo, so everything Nintendo owns or is associated with.
I didn't know Nintendo owned Pokemon.
That's the system that you can play Pokemon on.
That sounds like a rehearsed legal answer for legal reasons. You're playing with fire, my guy.
Just a little bit.
All right. Are you ready to hear more about this book, even though last time you didn't seem super interested in it?
Hit me.
All right, so a quick recap. We are continuing The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. It mainly focuses on the sisters Vienne and Isabel during the beginning of World War II. Vienne is the older sister, and she is described as being cautious, anxious, even paranoid at times. She trusts her government completely and pretty much blindly, and she believes that they will make decisions to save the lives of Frenchmen rather than carry out a losing war. Her husband, Antoine, was conscripted to the Maginot Line. I think that's how you say that. It's the front lines in 1939. So Vienne and Sophie have been living alone in their family's house for almost a year. I think it's been about 10 months. And then in June of 1940, Isabel, who's the younger sister, was expelled from her finishing school. And this was just one in a long line of finishing schools that Isabel's been expelled from. And I'm sure you're shocked to find out why. So when she's expelled, she is sent to live in Paris with her dad. Isabel is young and highly romanticizes the war in a lot of ways. She criticizes those who do not wish to fight in the war, and yet she does little to actually help anyone in her immediate vicinity. Her whole life, she felt like nobody saw her, or at least truly saw her, and that everyone would eventually abandon her. She wants to join the war efforts and be a hero like Edith Cavell, but this just shows how highly naive and romanticized her view of the world is. After Paris was invaded, her dad sends Isabel to live with Vienne in the fictional land of Caraveau. She meets a young man named Gaetan, who claims he was a convicted thief and a communist. Having only known him for a week and surviving a German bombing in the French countryside with him, Isabel falls in love with Gaetan. However, he abandons her as soon as they reach her sister's house, and then in the following days, France surrenders to the German invasion and occupation. So that's where we left off. Oh, wait, I have another paragraph.
I was like, I don't think so. I think there was a little bit more that happened.
When we last left...
I think she tried to Tiananmen Square.
Yeah. Hold on, let me take a drink.
A convoy.
When we last left off, Isabel tried to defy the German occupation, be it by blocking the street of the German caravan as it was coming through, or hiding the family heirlooms in the cellar below the barn. Most often, this ends with Vienne scolding Isabel. Both sisters think that the other isn't taking the war seriously, but just in different ways. 2 days after the Nazis occupied Carabobo, they call a meeting with the entire town to go over some new rules for the occupation. The rules included all radios, guns, explosives, and ammunition would be turned into the town hall immediately. All vehicles would be impounded. All persons would abide by a 9 p.m. curfew and must obtain written permission to leave the city. All food, whether grown or imported, would be controlled. Not so bad, see? We will live together in harmony. It will be of little hardship on those of you who obey the rules, said
Sturbenfurben?
It's not Sturbenfurben, it's the Sturbenführer. So I'm struggling with some of the French and German words in here, and I'm like, I am but a dum-dum, and I speak English very poorly at that. So, not so bad, see? We will live together in harmony. It will be of little hardship on those of you who obey the rules, said Sturbenführer Welt of the Geheimstaatspolizei. The German police, basically. I know that's what it is, and I know how to say it, but I'm looking at it and it's scaring me. But know this. Any act of sabotage or espionage or resistance will be dealt with swiftly and without mercy. The punishment for such behavior is death by execution. He pulled a pack of cigarettes from his breast pocket and extracted a single cigarette. Lighting it, he stared out at the people so intently it seemed he was memorizing each face. Also, although many of your ragged, cowardly soldiers are returning, we must inform you that the men taken prisoner by us shall remain in Germany. Vienne felt confusion ripple through the audience.
That's interesting. So are we not expecting her husband to come back then?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
So again, her husband was on the front lines, but she doesn't know if he's been taken prisoner or anything like that. And so he's just saying, while a lot of your guys are coming home, a lot of them aren't. So just deal with it. That's just how it is. The Sturmbannführer went on. You may leave now, as I am sure we understand each other. I will have officers here until 8:45 tonight. They will receive your contraband. Do not be late. And... he smiled good-naturedly. Do not risk your lives to keep a radio. Whatever you keep or hide, we will find. And if we find it, death. He said it so casually and wearing such a fine smile that for a moment it didn't sink in. The crowd stood there, a moment longer, uncertain whether it was safe to move. No one wanted to be seen as taking the first step. I'm going to have to take a lot of deep breaths throughout this.
Just a casual death threat.
Casual, with a smile on his face.
Very casual.
Like he wants to carry out his threats in a way. So on their way home, Isabel can't help but loudly exclaim, because she's young and stupid. I have to keep reminding myself that she is young and stupid. But she can't help but loudly exclaim that she is definitely not giving up her gun or her radio. And again, Vienne scolds her and tells her to quiet down. None of the German soldiers seem to pay her any mind, but still her behavior is quite reckless and Vienne is tired of it. So Vienne decides to walk ahead of Isabel. Again, Isabel is somewhat hobbled after her trek from Paris. Her feet are blistered and raw. Her face is bruised and scratched because of the bombings. So she can't exactly keep up with Vienne as Vienne just tries to trudge forward.
How many days has it been now? Just a couple?
I think maybe it's been a day since she's been at Vienne's house.
Okay.
And maybe a couple days since the bombing. But she's like, her feet are really hobbled and gross. So Vienne walks alongside her childhood friend Rachel, who is also her neighbor. And apparently growing up, Rachel and Vienne were very cruel to Isabel. They would also ignore her, neglect her, leave her out on purpose, exclude her, do all that kind of stuff. Stuff that teenagers do, to be perfectly honest. But at the time, Isabel and Vienne were also dealing with the fact that their dad abandoned them. And so this just added to Isabel's view that everyone's going to abandon her. So on the way home, Vienne and Rachel are walking next to each other. Before the meeting in town hall, Rachel apologized to Isabel because they all walked to the town hall together and they were supposed to walk back with each other. And then Vienne and Rachel are like, no, we're going to be walking off. But before they got to the town hall, Rachel was like, I'm so sorry that, we neglected you. We ignored you. We teased you. That must have been really hard to handle. And I'm so sorry for the pain that we caused you. Owning up to it, being, a normal person. And Isabel was like, I don't know how to respond to that. So she didn't. And Vienne got pissed because she's never been able to apologize to Isabel for treating her poorly. And Isabel is her sister. So she's like, Rachel, you can't say that. I haven't said it yet.
At the same time, they then both immediately ignore her again by walking in front.
Yes. I don't know. I don't know how important it is for Rachel to redeem herself. So as Rachel and Vienne are walking, Vienne is complaining about what a burden Isabel's being, how she's hiding their valuables and defiant in public. And instead of agreeing with Vienne, Rachel says, oh, that's actually kind of smart. I should hide my valuables. And Vienne gets so pissed at this that she's just like, well, fuck you too, Rachel, and just walks on ahead. So she leaves Rachel in the dust. She leaves Isabel in the dust and just takes Sophie, the 8-year-old, home. So one thing, I'm going to do my very best to not compare any of the books that I read on the pod with each other because they are all different. They will, for the most part, be randomly selected as far as they're all on my to be read list, but they, really don't have anything to do with each other. But I just have to point out that there are so many similarities between this book, The Nightingale, by Kristin Hannah, and Here There Are Monsters by Amelinda Berube, especially with how she portrays the sisters. So I'm going to go through them really quick and I'm never going to mention them again, but I had to say something about it. So number 1, there's an older sister who is tired of her younger sister's shenanigans. Number 2, the older sister is not able to handle the younger sister sometimes being right. Number 3, the older sister walking ahead of the younger sister and not glancing back to see if she's still there because that was the Halloween.
Yeah, that was the first instance.
And then this happened. I was like, what is happening? This is where I was like, oh my gosh, so many similarities. Number 4, the younger sister is yearning for adventure. Number 5, the younger sister has somewhat of a warped sense of justice. Number 6, the younger sister being misunderstood because she's weird. And I think that's all I had on here. But again, it's just a coincidence. These two books have absolutely nothing to do with each other. But I just had to. And maybe, to be fair, I think there's a lot of books that portray sisters this way, especially if it's just two sisters and there's no other siblings. This is always how it is. They're always going to be polar opposites. There's always going to be the one who's defiant and the one who's the rule follower. But I was losing my mind when I was reading this. I was like, oh my God, this feels so familiar. Why does this feel familiar?
It's a lot of generic tropes, but at the same time, it's a good way to tell a story.
I think it is a good way to tell a story. And so, yeah, I'm not knocking either of the authors for putting those tropes into their writing and into their books. I just think it's kind of funny, the coincidence of it all. Anyways, Vienne lit the stove and started cooking. When a creamy potato and lardon soup was simmering, she began to clean up. Of course, Isabel was nowhere around to help. She's been home for a little while now, and okay. Isabel did come home. I thought I should clarify that. Of course, Isabel was nowhere around to help. Sighing, she filled the sink with water to wash dishes. She was so intent on her task that it took her a moment to notice that there was someone knocking at the front door. Patting her hair, she walked into the living room, where she found Isabel rising from the divan, a book in her hands, reading while Vienne cooked and cleaned naturally. Are you expecting anyone? Isabel asked. Vienne shook her head. Maybe we shouldn't answer, Isabel said. Pretend we're not here. It's most likely Rachel. There was another knock at the door. Slowly, the doorknob turned, and the door creaked open. A German soldier stepped into her home.
Oh, no.
Oh, my pardons, the man said in terrible French. He removed his military hat, tucked it in his armpit, and smiled. He was a good-looking man, tall and broad-shouldered, with pale skin and light gray eyes. Vienne guessed he was roughly her age. His field uniform was precisely pressed and looked brand new. An iron cross decorated his stand-up collar, and a chunky leather utility belt cinched his waist. Behind him, through the branches of the orchard, she saw his motorcycle parked on the side of the road. A sidecar was attached to it, mounted with machine guns. Mademoiselle, he said to Vienne, giving her a swift nod as he clicked his boots together. Madame, she corrected him, wishing she sounded haughty and in control, but even to her own ears, she sounded scared. Madame Mauriac. I am Captain Wolfgang Beck. He handed her a piece of paper. My French is not so good. You will excuse my ineptitude, please. When he smiled, deep dimples formed in his cheeks. She took the paper and frowned at it. I don't read German. What do you want? Isabel demanded, coming to stand by Vienne. Your home is most beautiful and very close to the airfield. I noticed it upon our arrival. How many bedrooms have you? Why, Isabel said, at the same time Vienne said, 3. I will billet here, then. Billet, or is it billet?
I don't know.
Billet. Billet. I'm going to say billet.
I suppose.
I will billet here, the captain said in his bad French. Billet? Vienne said. You mean to stay? Oui, madame. Billet? You? A man? A Nazi? No. Isabel shook her head. No. The captain's smile neither faded nor fell. You were to town, he said, looking at Isabel. I saw you when we arrived. You noticed me? He smiled. I am sure every red-blooded man in my regiment noticed you. Funny you would mention blood, Isabel said. Vienne elbowed her sister. I am sorry, Captain. My younger sister is obstinate on occasion. But I am married, you see, and my husband is at the front, and there is my sister and my daughter here too, so you must see how inappropriate it would be to have you here. Ah, so you would rather leave the house to me. How difficult that must be for you. Leave, Vienne said. I believe you aren't understanding the captain, Isabel said, not taking her gaze from him. He's moving into your home. Taking it over, really, and that piece of paper is a requisition order that makes it possible. We can either make room for him or abandon a home that's been in our family for generations. He looked uncomfortable. This, I'm afraid, is the situation. Many of your fellow villagers are facing the same dilemma, I fear. If we leave, will we get our home back? I would not think so, madame.
Nope. You either leave and never come back, or deal with me, and I force you out eventually.
Vienne dared to take a step toward him. Perhaps she could reason with him. My husband will be home any day now, I imagine. Perhaps you could wait until he is here? I am not the general, alas. I am simply a captain. I follow orders, madame. I do not give them, and I am ordered to billet here. But I assure you that I am a gentleman. Vienne looked at Isabel, who shook her head slowly. Vienne knew there was no real choice. She had to keep Sophie safe until Antoine came home, and then he would handle all of this unpleasantness. Surely he would be home soon, now that the armistice had been signed. There is a small bedroom downstairs. You'll be comfortable there. Okay, so one more similarity between this and Here There Are Monsters is that the older sister never has choices. Okay, anyways, the captain is like, perfect, let me go grab my stuff. So he goes back to his motorcycle, and Vienna and Isabel have what I'm imagining is a whispered argument, just still on that front doorstep. I think they actually went inside, closed the door, and had an actual full volume argument because he wouldn't be able to hear them. But I don't know, the way that I direct these kinds of things in my head, it's just that they're just whispering at each other very furtively.
Loud whispers with hand movements.
So Isabel says that she personally cannot live with a Nazi, and that Vienne is crazy for opening up her home to him, and that they should go next door and live with Rachel, all of which Vienne strikes down. Partly because she's like, Rachel doesn't have room for her own family, let alone us. This is crazy. She seems paralyzed, and she can't really make a decision without Antoine, and she has to think about her daughter and what's best for her. So she's like, I will figure out how to get out of this later, but right now we have to let him in. Like, that's our only option. So she leads the captain to the basement bedroom. His suitcase plunked to the floor. She looked at him, compelled by simple politeness to offer a tense smile. You needn't worry, madame, he said. We have been admonished to act as gentlemen. My mother would demand the same, and, in truth, she scares me more than my general. It was such an ordinary remark that Vienne was taken aback. She had no idea how to respond to the stranger, who dressed like the enemy and looked like a young man she might have met at church. And what was the price for saying the wrong thing? He remained where he was, a respectful distance from her. I apologize for any inconvenience, madam. My husband will be home soon. We all hope to be home soon. Another unnerving comment. Vienne nodded politely and left him alone in the room, closing the door behind her. Tell me he's not staying, Isabel said, rushing at her.
What an idiot. Gently closes the door. He's not staying here. Yeah, he is, you stupid idiot.
He says he is, Vienne said tiredly, pushing back the hair from her eyes. She realized she was trembling. So, again, Vienne and Isabel get into a disagreement about whether or not Captain Beck will be staying with them. He eventually emerges from his room and interrupts their argument. While doing so, he notices the radio that is just sitting out because Isabel's been like glued to this radio ever since she got there. And he says that he will do them the kindness of turning it into his commander on their behalf. And Isabel cannot contain her snark and says that that's no kindness. And he tries to diffuse the tension, and to do so, he compliments Isabel, specifically complimenting her hair, to which she replies by cutting off a lot of it and just throwing it at him.
All right.
The sudden silence seemed to unnerve him. Suddenly, he said, "You have beautiful hair, mademoiselle." "Do you think so?" Isabel said, frowning, her voice low. "Quite lovely," Beck smiled. Isabel walked into the kitchen and came back with a pair of boning shears. His smile faded. "Am I misunderstood?" Isabel gathered up her thick blonde hair and fisted it. Staring grimly at Captain Beck's handsome face, she hacked off her hair and handed the long blonde tail to him. "It must be verboten for us to have anything beautiful, is it not, Captain Beck?" Vienne gasped. "Please, sir, ignore her. Isabel is a silly, prideful girl." "No," Beck said. "She is angry, and angry people make mistakes in war and die."
Just a casual threat.
"So do conquering soldiers," Isabel snapped. Beck laughed at her. Isabel made a sound that was practically a snarl and pivoted on her heel. She marched up the stairs and slammed the door shut so hard the house shook. "You will want to speak to her now, I warrant," Beck said. He looked at Vienne in a way that made it seem as if they understood each other. Such theatrics in the wrong place could be most dangerous. Vienne left him standing in her living room.
Yeah, he's essentially saying, you better control her before I'm forced to do something about this.
Exactly.
It's like, I don't want to. Like, I want to stay here and be okay. Mm-hmm. But if another person is here and they see this and I've done nothing about it, now bad things are going to happen.
Vienne left him standing in her living room and went upstairs. She found Isabel sitting on Sophie's bed, so angry she was shaking. Scratches marred her cheeks and throat, a reminder of what she'd seen and survived. And now her hair was hacked off, the ends uneven. "I could kill him in his sleep," she said. "Just slit his throat." "And do you think they would not come looking for a captain who had orders to billet here?" "Mon Dieu, Isabel." "Are you kidding, Vienne? The government is collaborating with Hitler. How can you not understand this danger? Pétain is wrong. Does one follow a leader blindly?" Vienne moved toward Isabel slowly, half afraid of her now. She took a deep breath to calm her racing nerves. "I know there are problems between us. I know I treated you badly as a child and Papa treated you worse. But this is not about us now, and you can't be the girl who acts impetuously anymore. It's about my daughter now, your niece. We must protect her." She clasped her hands to still them. "You don't remember the last war. I do. I remember the stories about Verdun and Somme and a million Frenchmen dying in trenches that ran red with blood. And the German atrocities, don't forget that part of it. They were cruel, Isabel. That's my point exactly. They were cruel because we were at war with them, Isabel. Pétain has saved us from going through that again. He has kept us safe. He has stopped the war. Now Antoine and all of our men will come home." "To a Heil Hitler world," Isabel said with a sneer. "The flame of the French resistance must not die. We have to fight however we can. For France, Vi, so it stays France." "Enough," Vienne said. She moved close enough to her that she could have whispered to Isabel, or kissed her, but Vienne did neither. Instead, in a steady voice, she said, "You will take Sophie's room upstairs, and she will move in with me. And remember this, Isabel, he could shoot us. Shoot us, and no one would care. You will not provoke this soldier in my home." She saw the words hit home. Isabel stiffened. "I will try to hold my tongue."
No, that's not good enough.
"Do more than try." After this, Vienne continues to cook dinner because that's what was happening when Captain Beck came to the door. And she keeps having these really weird interactions with Captain Beck. I personally can't tell what's going on between Vienne and Captain Beck because I've talked a little bit with my friend Bree, who recommended this book in the first place. And Bree says that the reason she interacts with Captain Beck the way that she does is because she craves normalcy in a world that's just been turned on its head. And so with Captain Beck being a man in her house, she treats him like the man of the house and kind of does all that kind of stuff. But I'm like, I don't know. I get some weird flirty vibes between Vienne and Beck. And Captain Beck does reveal that he's married and has children. But I'm like, that doesn't stop anybody from being weird and creepy. There's just certain things about, and I can't tell if it's Vienne who's flirting with him or if it's him who's flirting with Vienne. But there's some weird tension between the two of them. And it's more than just a Nazi living with a person who does not want him there, you know? So
I think she's just trying to play a role, and that's the only way she knows how, maybe?
that's potentially a good way to look at it. In the kitchen, she found her potato soup simmering a bit too briskly, so she uncovered it and lowered the heat. Madam, are you sanguine?
Sanguine? Are you blood?
Sanguine means optimistic or positive, especially in an apparently bad or difficult situation. Also, it does mean blood red, like a color.
Yeah, because I've only heard it as like a descriptor for blood.
She flinched at the sound of his voice. When had he come in here? She took a deep breath and patted her hair. It was not the word he meant. Really, his French was terrible. That smells delicious, he said, coming up behind her. She set the wooden spoon down on the rest beside the stove. May I see what you are making? Of course, she said, both of them pretending that her wishes mattered. It's just potato soup. My wife, alas, is not much of a cook. He was right beside her now, taking Antoine's place, a hungry man peering down at a cooking dinner. You are married, she said, reassured by it, although she couldn't say why, and a baby soon to be born. We are planning to call him Wilhelm, although I will not be there when he is born, and, of course, such decisions must inevitably be his mother's. It was such a human thing to say. She found herself turning slightly to look at him. He was her height, almost exactly, and it unnerved her. Looking directly into his eyes made her feel vulnerable. God willing, we will all be home soon, he said. He wants this over too, she thought with relief. It's supper time, Herr Captain. Will you be joining us? It would be an honor, madam. Although you will be pleased to hear that most evenings I will be working late and enjoying my supper with the officers. I shall also often be out on campaigns. You shall sometimes hardly notice my presence. So she definitely seems very uncomfortable about being alone with him. Part of this is the time frame. So part of this is the time frame of this story. It was considered improper for men and women to be alone together, especially because she's married and her husband isn't home. And so it is like Beck is taking over that position as the man of the house. And that's obviously just going to be uncomfortable.
So far, this seems awkwardy.
So there is like this awkwardness. I think it's just for me, it's like the fact that like he comes up behind her when she's cooking. And I don't know if that's also going to be like foreshadowing for him, because like a lot of times he enters a room and nobody notices that he enters the room because he's very quiet.
He's sneaky.
So he's sneaky, and I'm like, what does that mean? What is that gonna do? It's just weird that like he comes up behind her and he stands next to her like he belongs there. Like, to me, I'm just like, there's something weird.
We're also only getting her perspective, but at the same time, he's probably just like, what's being cooked? How else do you enter a room when someone is facing away and you just go to look at what they're doing?
I don't know. I think it's just the fact that he feels comfortable to be in her space.
Oh yeah, he's fucking all over.
Which I think part of that also shows just the dynamics of the power situation.
Oh yeah, he's got all the power. He can do whatever he wants, really.
Right.
What are either of them supposed to do about it, though?
Well, exactly, yeah. What are they supposed to do about it? And I think the answer is they are doing what they are told. Like, I don't think he wants to be there any more than she wants him there, but he's like, I'm doing my duty, but it's still awkward. And the first night, Isabel does her best. I don't really think it's her best, but she does try not to provoke Beck at dinner. But she ends up finishing her food quickly and excusing herself from the table because she's like, I can't even like pretend to have a conversation with you. I'm just gonna not be in the same room as you. That's just gonna be the only way that I can do this. Isabel finished her soup and got to her feet. Excuse me, I'm feeling sick to my stomach. Me too, Sophie said. She got to her feet and followed her aunt out of the room like a puppy follows a lead dog, with her head down. Vienne sat perfectly still, her soup spoon held above her bowl. They were leaving her alone with him. Her breathing was a flutter in her chest. She carefully set down her spoon and dabbed at her mouth. Forgive my sister, Herr Captain. She is willful. My oldest daughter is such a girl. We expect nothing but trouble when she gets a little older. That surprised Vienne so much she turned. You have a daughter? Gisela, he said, his mouth curving into a smile. She is 6, and already her mother is unable to get her to reliably do the simplest of tasks, like brush her teeth. Our Gisela would rather build a fort than read a book, he sighed, smiling. It flustered her, knowing this about him. She tried to think of a response, but her nerves were too overwrought. She picked up her spoon and began eating again. The meal seemed to go on forever, in a silence that was her undoing. So, again, Vienne is left alone with Beck. Even though Isabel criticized her for being alone with him earlier when she was cooking dinner. He came into the kitchen and was talking to her, and Isabel's like, why are you alone with him? And Vianne's like, okay. And then they have dinner, and then Isabel leaves. And Vianne's like, now I'm alone with him. What the fuck?
Yeah. Like, I'm alone with him because you won't be in the same room with me and that guy. Like, it's not my fault that you won't be around.
And Vianne is very unnerved by this wolf in sheep's clothing type trope that we've got going on. How he seems so normal. And she makes several internal comments about how he's handsome. That's the part that's like weirding me out, is how often she specifically is thinking that he is a handsome man.
She finds him conventionally attractive.
But she knows that he's her enemy. She can't reconcile that ordinary people could be monsters, because really, what makes a monster a monster? Does he have to participate in the monstrous act to be a monster, or is just being part of the German army, even if he wasn't doing anything and he's idly allowing monstrosities to happen, is that enough for him to be called a monster? Because if he's a monster and yet she can relate to him so well, then what does that make her?
I had a feeling they were going to kind of explore this part of war.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, you're both just people.
I think it's interesting to show what lengths people will go to for normalcy. And I also think that it really shows how most people are not monsters. I think that there are some people that are monsters, especially in World War II. But I think it's one of those things where a lot of it is complacency and not wanting to resist.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's because you're afraid or because you truly believe that there's some good that can come out of it or whatever. But I think it really just shows that there are a lot of seemingly normal people that are involved in some horrific things. By the time she'd washed and dried the dishes, put them away, night had fallen. She left the house, stepping into the starlit front yard for a moment's peace. On the stone garden wall, a shadow moved. Behind her, she heard a footfall, then a match strike and the smell of sulfur. She took a quiet step backward, wanting to melt into the shadows. If she could move quietly enough, perhaps she could return by the side door without alerting him to her presence. She stepped on a twig, heard it snap beneath her heel, and she froze. He stepped out from the orchard. "Madam," he said, "so you love the starlight also. I am sorry to intrude upon you." She was afraid to move. He closed the distance between them, taking a place beside her as if he belonged there, looking out across the orchard. "You would never know there's a war on out there," he said. Vianne thought he sounded sad, and it reminded her that they were alike in a way, both of them far away from the people they loved. "Isn't this a lovely little moment between new friends?" Isabel said. Vianne flinched, horrified that she had been caught standing out here with a German, the enemy, a man. It does say a man. It's not like I'm just making that up. I'm like, she's standing out here with a man. That's the least of your worries, honey.
What is Isabel doing? She just happened to decide to go outside?
Well, Beck goes back into the house to allow Isabel and Vianne to talk privately. I think he called it a sisterly conversation. And the reason for this is that when Isabel stepped outside, she had a suitcase in one hand and Vianne's hat in another. And Isabel tells Vianne that she is leaving to go back to Paris. At first, Vianne is like, what the fuck? But then Isabel says that she recognizes the danger that she puts on Sophie and that she's too hot-headed and will say something stupid and get them all killed if she continues to live in the same house as a Nazi. Vianne is relieved and tells her sister to be careful and to not do any foolish. Me? You know better than that. They hug and Isabel leaves. But Isabel doesn't really get that far because on her way to the train station, she's stopped by German soldiers who reprimand her for being out past curfew.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they go pretty easy on her because she's a pretty girl. She knows it. She's known her whole life that she's pretty and she's used it to her advantage.
Yeah, but she's all fucked up right now.
She's not terribly fucked up. I mean, the fact that she stopped the caravan and like all the red-blooded men in the regiment were like, hello.
She's like half her hair and...
Yeah. She's not fucked up enough to make them not see that she's pretty.
All right.
So because she's a pretty girl, they take it easy on her, but they do insist that she goes back home because travel is restricted. So since she didn't have written permission to leave, she was not allowed to leave. Go home, girl, before you get hurt. But now, before I decide not to ignore you. Inside, Isabel was screaming in frustration. It took considerable effort to walk away from the sentry without saying anything. On the way home, she didn't even keep to the shadows. She flaunted her disregard for the curfew, daring them to stop her again.
Well, I mean, if she got caught by a different one, they'd probably be like, what are you doing? Be like, I just got sent back home, all right? They said I don't have permission to leave, so I'm going back, all right? How do I get this permission? I didn't even bother to look it up or listen to the the whole spiel in the center square at all.
I don't remember if they said that in the spiel or not, but anyways. This could not be her life. Trapped in a house with a Nazi, in a town that had given up without a whimper of protest. Vienne was not alone in her desire to pretend that France had neither surrendered nor been conquered. In town, shopkeepers and bistro owners smiled at the Germans and poured them champagne and sold them the best cuts of meat. The villagers shrugged and went on with life. Oh, they muttered disapprovingly and shook their heads and gave out wrong directions when asked. But beyond those small rebellions, there was nothing. No wonder the German soldiers were swollen with arrogance. They had taken over this town without a fight. But Isabel could never forget what she'd seen in the field near Tours. So when she arrived back home and told Vienne that she needed a pass to leave town, Vienne took the news in stride and basically said to Isabel that she needed to start pulling her weight and stop being stupid. She's like... Okay, you're here to stay? Well, fucking act like it and stop being a bitch.
All right. That's not how I thought it was going to go. I thought I was going to be like, Wolfgang, can you write that she can leave?
That's what I was kind of thinking was going to happen, but no. So Isabel struggled with this, but she did her best for Sophie's sake, if no one else's. So one morning, about a week later, she went out to stand in line with her ration cards, ready to do her part, because that's what Vienne was saying. Mm-hmm. Vienne was like, you need to pull your weight. One of the things that you can do is while I'm away at work and Sophie's at school, you can stand in line and get food for us because somebody has to, and I don't have time now that rations are so low. While she's standing in line, she saw some chalk on the sidewalk and picked it up and pocketed it because she's like, nobody's looking at me, it's fine. After picking up her rations, she started on her way home, keeping to the alleyways so as not to be noticed. And on her way home, she saw a propaganda poster that essentially blamed the Jewish people for everything that was wrong with the world and for the war.
Mm-hmm.
She looked around to see if she was alone, and thinking that the coast was clear, she took out the chalk from her pocket and started defacing the poster.
Doing a little graffiti.
She reached into her pocket and pulled out her piece of chalk. When she was sure the coast was clear, she drew a huge V for victory on the poster, obliterating as much of the image as she could. Her piece of chalk fell, clattered to the cobblestones, and rolled into one of the cracks. Mademoiselle, a man said, shoving her against the poster she'd just defaced, pressing her cheek into the paper so that she couldn't see him. Do you know it is verboten to do that? And punishable by death? End scene. End chapter.
Oh, no. How dare you?
How dare I? That's how Kristin Hannah wrote it.
You did warn me it was going to be a cliffhanger.
Yes.
I'm calling the cliffhanger police. That's a good spot.
It is a good spot, I think.
I can speculate.
What are your speculations?
It's Wolfgang.
You think it's Wolfgang?
Mm-hmm. Is Mademoiselle just a standard French greeting?
Yes, it means it's the same thing as Miss in America or in English speaking. So like when Vienne corrects him from Mademoiselle to Madam, it's like correcting somebody from saying Miss to Mrs. Like, I am married.
Okay.
Why?
I was just wondering. For some reason, I thought in my head maybe that was their last name for whatever reason.
No, Rossignol.
Rossignol.
Which means the Nightingale, or Nightingale. But Vienne is married, and so she's now Mariac, I think. I can't remember the names.
I thought that was a good couple chapters. I like that it's showing a bit of humanness to everyone, because that's what it is. Everyone's a human, and they have their own issues and story. It's
hard to get out of the black and white of like there's good and there's evil, there's right and there's wrong, and like this was wrong. But at the same time, like I recognize that everybody that was involved in the war was a human. And some humans make some very monstrous decisions, and some are complicit in those decisions.
Yep.
Sorry. I'm not kidding about the amount of deep breaths I'm going to have to take through this.
Oh yeah, there's so much else that was going on during that time period. Within Germany too, like leading up to everything. It's such a interesting period of time because so much happened so quickly. And just the political and economic landscape of the entire world at that time was wild. I personally feel like I don't know as much about World War II as I should. It's heavy and it's hard, and for me it's hard to know that there's a lot that I
didn't know about the war. That's the same with World War I as well. I think that there's probably a lot that I don't know about World War I that
I'll admit
should.
to ignorance on that one as well, because it's not quite as documented. They spoke about it a little bit in this book so far. It happened within one person's lifetime. People alive during the story that were young, even old people were alive between World War I and World War II.
Because World War I was in the early 1910s, right?
I couldn't give you dates. Let's look it up so we're not ignorant.
July 1914 to November 1918.
And then it's 1939 to 1945 for World War II. So
this is still the start of World War II, where we're at in the book. We're in 1940. But like 1914 to 1940, that's... Oh God, I'm going to do math real quick. Hold on. It's like 25 years difference.
Mm-hmm. So like a young person, like a conscripted soldier of like 20 is now only 40.
Well, and Vienne and Isabel's dad fought in World War I. Mm-hmm. And Vienne talks about how he was a different man when he went to war from when he came back. I'm curious if Antoine, I keep calling him Anton, and I just forget the toi part of his name.
Antoine.
But I'm curious if Antoine comes home. And part of the reason why I'm curious about that is because when we did our episode with Bree, and by we, I mean me, when I did my episode with Bree, she was very struck by one of the passages that I chose, which was describing how his face was like half illuminated in the moonlight and then half of it was in shadow. And so I'm assuming that there's going to be this kind of dichotomy in every person and in every character of the good and the evil or whatever. It was specifically of Antoine, so I don't know if she was just struck by that because Antoine has this like half and half to him. So if he ever comes back, like, is that going to be something? Or if she was reacting to that because other characters have that half and halfness to them or what? But I am curious to see if he comes back. What did you learn today?
I learned don't compliment someone's hair or they'll chop it off and throw it at you. Or is that just crazy people that do that?
I don't like how much you don't like Isabel.
She's just being really stupid.
I agree that she's being reckless.
She's just being really reckless and stupid. That's my only issue. I think it's a great character.
Yeah.
And she has all the proper reasons, but she's just being really stupid and reckless.
Yeah, I think part of it is just that she's always gotten away with that kind of behavior. So she's not used to having to hold her tongue, because this is why she's been kicked out of every fucking finishing school that she's been in and every orphanage and everything like that.
I just don't understand how you can see the horrors of war and then be so aggressive to someone when you've literally seen what happens.
I agree. I do think that she is very reckless, and I think that goes to her youngness, her naivete, her kind of romanticizing of the war. I can see why she's so frustrated with everybody it seems to her that nobody's put up a fight and that she's like, what the fuck? This isn't the France I know. Like, when you look at French history, when have they ever given up a fight? You know?
Yeah. They almost conquered all of Europe like several times.
I learned that, you're going to hate me for this one. I learned that if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
Yeah, but I haven't won any prizes.
You know what you've won? You've won the frustration of not being able to play with everybody because you're playing a stupid game by trying to do this illegally.
It's not much better on Nintendo either. It's their netcode is pretty terrible too, but at least it works usually.
Shall we promote our socials?
Let's do it. You can find us on Instagram
at apotofsass.
You can send us an email
at apotofsass@gmail.com.
You can check out our Patreon.
Patreon.com/apotofsassandSarcasm and donate if you're feeling so inclined. We have several different tiers and we've got lots of goodies like bonus episodes. We're working on some newer content and it's just a really great time, and you can help support the podcast, help us keep the quality better. Hopefully you're noticing with the new microphones that things are a little bit better. But
yeah, new mic gang.
new mic, who this? You can rate and review anywhere that you find us. We should be everywhere that you find podcasts. But please rate and review. It honestly helps us stay on the charts and get out there to different people who maybe haven't heard us yet. And so we really, really appreciate anything that you've got to say about us, even if it's constructive criticism and, you know, feedback that we can apply to future episodes to make this better for you. We really want to make it enjoyable for everyone. And we certainly hope that you keep listening.
Keep it sassy.
Oh my gosh. You rarely say that, and it makes me so happy every time you do. Later. Mademoiselle, he said. Oh, that... I mean, I get that he talks in terrible French, but that was just me not being able to read. Hold on. I am I'm just gonna die.
You're struggling so hard.
I do not have a brain today. My mother would
You cannot speak for Wolfgang, apparently.
I apparently cannot. Such a cool name, though. You didn't... I think I'm gonna die, Ian. The government is collaborating... Patent is wrong. Does... I'm like in Isabel's head and I'm flustered. Sorry.
Oh my god.
I don't know if I've talked about this outwardly on the podcast, and even if I have, I might have edited it out, but I just get really excited when I talk, and I think, I don't know if it's my diaphragm or something, gets really like unsettled, and it's literally just when we do the pod. It's never any other time, but I just like have the burps.
Well, you've drank so much water.
That's because I suffer from dry mouth, and I don't like the sound of dry mouth.
Yeah, every time you like mess up, you're like, more water. You've had like half a liter.
Okay. Angrily drinks water to deal with my problems.